I want to take a few minutes to talk to you a little bit about what education and the impact of education in my life, and then talk a little bit about the global education market. Over the last few quarters, I've had a chance to spend a lot of time on what's happening in the education market, and then talk a little bit about the growth opportunities in India, and then obviously at the end talk about how all of us can help. So let me get started. I'll try to insert some jokes, but it's not going to be as good as Paul, so please, if you see an opportunity, start clapping. So I was born and brought up in Calcutta, India, and I don't know how to spell it the new way because I'm about 90 years old, so, but Calcutta, India, a long time ago. And like all young boys in India, I played a lot of gulli danda, played kabaddi and everything else, played cricket, hockey, soccer, whatever you want to call it, and along the way studied when my parents insisted. But something changed when I turned 18. I came to the US, and it was a turning point in my life. I had great aspirations, wanted to do a lot. I knew it was going to be really hard. I studied hard, paid for college, worked at fast food restaurants, and persevered through everything that ever happened. And in Arizona State, I met my best friend and my wife, Neetha, and if you see her on her phone now, she's if you see her on the phone now, she's actually checking the Dallas Cowboys score. And together, we've supported each other. We have 3 beautiful daughters, and we continue the journey on parenting. If you look at the journey from the outside, it looks fairly seamless, right? It looks fairly seamless. I married my college sweetheart, had kids, had some great gigs, became the CEO of Apogee, took it public, Google bought us. Wow, I've lived the American dream. And I indeed have. But my lucky breaks did not happen when I came to the US. It happened a long time before that, a long, long time before that. And if I took a poll of the audience here and said the impact of education on all your lives, and we are very privileged to be here, if I asked anybody in the audience, you would generally say these 3 or 4 things had to do with your success, right? You would say family support was a big part of it. You would say drive. You would definitely have education. And you probably say luck as well, right? It probably had something to do with it. And it is really interesting that education is something that is consistent for all of us. It's a big part of what we've done. But for me, education was obviously a big part, but it was a foundation. And every time I think about the word education, I think about the word exposure. And it started for me a long time ago, long before I ever came to the US. When I got a chance to go to the British Council Library in Calcutta and read a book called The Little Kingdom. How many people in the audience have actually read Little Kingdom? Awesome. Go and buy one. Buy a copy. It was written by a gentleman, and this would be actually easy. How many people in the audience know somebody called Mike Moritz? Lots of people. Mike used to be a Times reporter a long time ago before he became a very successful venture capitalist at Sequoia. And he wrote the book called The Little Kingdom. It was about Apple, and it was about the 2 Steves that went off and created this beautiful company. That's the book that inspired me. It obviously had great teachers. I learned math, science, everything else. But what inspired me was reading that book. It showed me what was possible, how technology could impact the world in such a significant way. And it changed everything I ever did from then on out. So every time I think about the word education, I think about exposure, the art of the possible. How do you mix and match different things from different industries and actually make them happen? But let's be clear. You can talk about education, you can talk about exposure, but none of that happens without nourishment. And at the individual level, it's actually pretty simple, right? You're hungry, you want to learn, you go to the kitchen, and you eat some food. It's as simple as that. But just realize there are millions of people that don't have anything in their kitchens to eat. right? And at the country level, it gets even more complicated, right? If you look at the Global Hunger Index, they do this survey every year. The numbers are not out for 2019. You will look for 2018, they actually identified 119 countries that had undernourished children. 119 countries. And India ranked as 103. Close to 195 million kids are undernourished in India. That's a staggering number, right? It's a staggering number because we know that everything, as parents, as leaders, we know that everything that a kid learns happens in their formidable years of their life. They don't sing, they don't dance, they don't get a chance to play, they don't go off and get a chance to read. And that affects everything they do. The good news is that Akshaya Patra is doing something about it. By the way, I love that chapati machine. And so, I mean, they're doing a lot with it, with the goal of going off and actually having 5 million meals a day. That will have a big impact on these numbers over the years to come. And I love this next example I'm going to walk you through. Madhusudan is, this is, by the way, a great example where we cannot actually talk about causation, but we can actually talk about correlation. Right? Before he started getting exposed to Akshaya Patra, he didn't have good grades, went off, did phenomenally well every year after 7th grade, went off, got a scholarship, and actually graduated from Bangalore University, and now is a CPA. So it's this great, great success stories. And there are so many more out there. This was just one that I wanted to highlight for you. Over the last 9 months, I've had a chance to go deep into the education space. It's what I've been doing at Google recently, and have had a chance to see what is actually happening in the education world. So I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about it. It's about a $6 trillion market. About close to 3% of it is actually technology spend. And in the next 6 years, it's going to become about 5%. And what is interesting is the amount of money spent in the US and Canada for the population that those two countries have versus the money that's spent on education in APAC. These numbers will look extremely differently in 5 years, right? There's going to be a significant change. This is almost like looking at the rearview mirror, and I think it's going to change significantly. What a lot of venture capitalists have done is actually look at these numbers and say the 3% spend on technology is really, really small. And here is what the spend is now happening with venture capitalists actually going off and investing money in this, in the education space. You look at China, they're nearly doubling every year from an investment point of view. You look at India, the same thing is happening. There is growth, obviously, in US and in EMEA, but it's staggering, and they're good success stories. You can look at companies like VIP Kids doing really well. In China, you can actually look at what's happening with Baiju in India, and they continue to do really well. So where's all this money going, right? What are they trying to do? And here's what's happening. At the bottom line of all this is that we do not learn the way we live. We just don't, right? I mean, learning has to change significantly. We've been doing it the same way for a long, long, long time, right? And institutions are having a hard time keeping up. They're almost teaching, given how old we are, or how old I am, I'll take a shot at myself, I would tell you the curriculum for my daughters in a CS program is about the same that mine was about 600 years ago, right? And so I think that needs to change, and institutions are having a hard time keeping up. And the last thing is, technology is changing, and people are looking for alternatives. I believe 5 things have to change significantly over the next few years. 1, learning needs to happen across all media. That means it has to blend the offline world and the online world. It has to happen. Companies are starting to do it, and it will continue to happen. Secondly, we must start teaching kids based on real-world problems, not on the theories that were set up 50 years ago, because the world has changed significantly. And I think project-based learning is going to become something that is going to become mainstream as that happens. Third, we absolutely have to have ML and AI, and we have to use it to automate tasks, mundane tasks for teachers, so that they can actually spend time focusing on driving personalized learning for different kids. So there's a lot of things like that. And the last thing, which something that we've spent a lot of time and are passionate about, is that it's not just what you learn, it is what you can do with your learnings. And I think mastery is going to become a very big concept as this happens. So lots of really good change in the education market as you see forward. And the good news is, with all this stuff happening, India is actually doing a lot, right? $15 billion is what was spent, is what was in the budget for the 2019-2020 India budget. There are about 260 million kids that go to about 1.5 million schools. And the good news is that a lot of them are becoming mobile-first learners. Now, this 400 million number is not just the kids that go to school, K-12 school. This is all learners that do supplemental learning and things like that. The Indian government has made it very clear that they are going to actually use AI-based technologies to make it cost-effective enough to actually be able to serve 500 million learners moving forward. And Akshaya Patra is actually starting to follow that path, right? They just recently introduced a robotics program, a 2-year robotics program in Bangalore. Kids are given kits that they can go off and work with. And I think it is really interesting that they're doing it now. 2 things that stand out for me. One, in addition to everything they learn about robotics, they actually get a chance to focus on the 4 C's, right? What are the 4 C's? Creative thinking, critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. All extremely important to be successful in this world. The second thing is they're also picking up skills there's going to be high demand for. So great job, and I think these kinds of programs will have to continue. So in closing, very rarely do we come across an organization, I think we've heard a lot, and we'll continue throughout the evening, very rarely could you come across an organization that does something as significant as Akshaya Patra does at this scale in the world we live in. We've already established, and we all know intuitively as well as with data, that nourishment, education, exposure make all the difference. And as parents, as leaders, and just as good just as good citizens who worry about the future, we must and should do and continue to do more. I think at the end of the day, learning for each of us means progress for all of us. I hope all of you open your checkbooks and participate in this initiative. Thank you very much.